I found a video rental store in a small town. What was on the tape shattered my family. I've always wanted to make this trip. My whole life, Seattle has been my home, and I'd never ventured far before now. A coast-to-coast road trip with my husband and children had been a fantasy of mine since I first started dating the man decades ago. It slowly became clear over the years that despite his promises, the trip would never be happening. At 50, I'm finally on the road, but I never wanted it to be like this, not under these circumstances. I am alone. It's only happening now because my son is dead. After the divorce, my children were, in my mind, old enough to choose where they wanted to live. John, my oldest, chose to stay with me. My daughter, Bree, went with my ex-husband. I tried my best to maintain a relationship with her, but she never seemed interested. God only knows what my ex was telling her about me. Growing up, John was my world. I seldom dated after leaving his father. I just never had the time, as I worked 2 or 3 jobs while raising him. It was worth it, though. John knew about my dream trip. He brought it up several times along his journey to becoming a man. "You'll get your trip one day, Ma," he'd said, "even if I have to take you myself." His funeral was the worst day of my life. My ex-husband and daughter were there, and a piece of me hoped I would have at least some support from them, but it wasn't to be. The glare my ex gave me said everything, even though he didn't speak the words. "It's all your fault." I couldn't even bring myself to speak at the podium after that. My daughter gave a eulogy instead. Through sobs, she lamented her rocky relationship with Chan and how much she regretted her role in them not being close. She even went as far as to tell everyone that he had been her inspiration to become a paramedic. John had never married, so I suppose it shouldn't have come as a surprise that he had appointed me the executor of his estate. It was then I learned he had listed me as the beneficiary of a $1 million life insurance policy. I didn't care about the money, or really much of anything. I spent a lot of time watching videos of my son on my phone. Every time I pressed play, I wished the house fire hadn't destroyed the old tapes from when our family was together. I would have given anything to see those again. It was at this low point I knew it was time for that road trip. It started off normally enough, actually. I made the usual tourist stops, as well as many off the beaten path, discovered through years of research. It wasn't until the Midwest that the problem started. I won't name the state, just in case. I had been driving long enough to not remember what time I had started that day. The sun had long since set when my low fuel warning pinged from the dashboard. The timing was perfect, as I could barely keep my eyes open. I pulled off at the first exit I saw that listed a gas station and slowly followed an empty road towards a promised town. Johnstown. Seeing the name made my spine shiver, but a glance at the gas gauge decided the matter for me. After several uncomfortable miles, the lights of a gas station appeared along the main road into the town. As I pulled up to the pump, I noticed the absence of a credit card reader. While I did not want to enter the small building before me as a woman alone at night, the .32 Tomcat pistol in my purse gave me enough nerve to go inside to buy fuel. Though outdated, the inside was surprisingly well maintained. I went straight up to the counter where a young man in a camo hat stood, looking thoroughly uninterested. "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. "Can I get some gas on the pump out there?" The man stared at me without a word. Though I held my smile, I felt the hairs on my neck standing up. I could have sworn the lights inside dimmed slightly when he began pushing buttons on the register. "How much?" he asked in a monotone voice. "50, I said, sliding cash onto the counter. "Keep what's left if there is any." Without breaking his gaze to so much as glance at the bill, the man slowly reached for it. For a moment, the image of him snatching my arm and pulling me over the counter flashed across my mind, but he simply opened the drawer and placed the bill inside. "Anything else?" "No, sir, that's it. Thank you," I said, before speed walking back to my car. Though I kept my head down, I could feel his eyes on me as I pumped. I considered making a break for the highway, but my eyelids began to flutter once more once back inside my car. I could see the town ahead and decided it wouldn't hurt to at least see if the motel seemed safe. As I made my way down the main street, every building was dark except for the motel. It was an unassuming rectangular building with 2 floors. Most of the windows were dark, but the few rooms with lights on were somewhat reassuring. I sat in my car for a moment, the engine still running. Nothing seemed unusual as I scanned the parking lot. It seemed safe enough to walk inside. I grabbed my backpack, stepped out of my car, and paused for a moment. I couldn't help but think of how much safer I would feel if John had been with me. When I walked towards the entrance, I looked back towards the street. To my surprise, the closest building was lit. I guess I'd been too tired to notice it before. The neon sign out front read True Video. A video rental store still open in 2026? Wow, guess the town's a little behind, I thought. The motel manager greeted me as I stepped inside the front entrance. To my immense relief, she seemed to be a perfectly normal lady, roughly my own age. Now much more at ease, I opted to rent a room, and she gave me a physical iron key. Room 211 was exactly what you might expect. Old, small, with decor not updated since 1970. What paint that was visible in spots above the dreadful floral wallpaper was a weathered yellow. A queen bed sat against the back wall, facing a dresser with a TV on it. I set my backpack on the bed before turning back towards the TV. It had been years since I had seen an old tube television, and right next to it, an honest-to-God VCR. My mind went straight to 1999, when John was little. Once a week, I would take him to Blockbuster, and we would choose a film for a family movie night. I thought back to True Video across the street. The nostalgia was too enticing. I made my way out into the cool night air. The hum of the neon sign soon broke the silence of the empty streets as I approached True Video. A bell on the door dinged as I stepped inside, but nobody approached the empty counter. I paid little attention, instead focusing on finding the family movie section. After a brief search, I held in my hands a copy of my son's favorite childhood film, All Dogs Go to Heaven. I stared at the tape as I stood at the counter, lost in my memories. "Anything else for you tonight, ma'am?" came a familiar voice. My eyes snapped upward to see the same young man from the gas station smiling at me from behind the counter. I felt a chill race throughout my body. I couldn't respond. While the young man's clothes and demeanor were entirely different, it was definitely him. This time, however, I noticed a small circular scar on the side of his neck, as well as a name tag, Michael. My silence seemingly didn't affect the man as he held his warm smile for several silent seconds. I regained control of my body and shook my head vigorously. "All right then," he beamed. "Your total is $5.37. Quickly and with a shaking hand, I pulled a 5 and a 1 from my purse and dropped it on the counter, ignoring his outstretched hand. The man simply scooped the bills off the counter as if I hadn't been so rude, and handed me my change. "Thank you for your business, ma'am," he said cheerfully. "Have a wonderful evening." I hurriedly left without a word, tape in hand. I didn't stop until I was safely locked back inside my room, now wide awake. It probably took half an hour to calm down, but eventually I reasoned to myself that the men must be brothers, or maybe even cousins. It made sense with the limited employment options in this town of this small. That had to be it. While I still had on edge, I was finally relaxed enough to push the tape into the VCR and settle myself in the bed. Of course, I was crying within the first 5 minutes of the film. It was like being brought back in time without my son waiting for me there. I cried harder as I thought of his heart attack. He wasn't even 30 yet. The coroner said it had been quick, but John had still died alone in the dark. An hour into the film, I had run out of tears. In a way, the brutal experience had made me closer to my baby boy. It had been worth it. I closed my eyes, ready to drift off as the movie played in the background. When I heard it, static. I guess that's why we got away from tapes, I thought, but before I could even open my eyes, I heard my ex-husband's voice from the TV speakers. "He's beautiful. Good job, Grace." I'd know that moment anywhere. Sure enough, when my eyes snapped to the TV, there was the home video my husband had taken when John was born. The image of me holding our son in my hospital bed came into focus. Every fuzzy pixel matched the old tapes I'd lost in the fire. As I watched myself beam on the screen, the video again cut to static. After a moment came a video shot on the day we first brought John home. My ex gave a tour of the house on camera, proudly showing off the nursery we had built together and decorated. The scene cut again. My cheeks were soaked in tears. I was entirely transfixed. It hadn't even entered my mind how impossible this was. John's first Christmas. My dearly departed parents beamed as John happily beat the hellfire out of the toy they had gifted him. I saw the pride and joy on my own face. The video ended just as I remembered it, with John shitting himself loudly in his high chair. My parents' laughter was broken by another wall of static. John's first birthday played next. Then his first words. Well, we recorded those later in the day when he did it a second time. A video I had taken of him racing through the house in his father's cowboy boots came next. Then the day his sister Brianna was born. 3-year-old John grinned ear to ear as he held his little sister. The scene played out just as I remembered, but there was one difference, and that difference became a recurring theme. Whenever my daughter's face looked directly at the camera, the entire screen wavered and slid out of focus for a moment before returning to normal. Every video I had ever taken of the kids played in order. Every single one. Their dance party at age 6 and 3, their first bike rides, the silly moments, each of their milestones, the blog I filmed for 7-year-old John, wherein he rambled about how the Easter Bunny must be a trained killer. I remember